The White House has welcomed countless legends, heroes, and world leaders through its grand doors. Presidents have shaken hands with Olympic champions, Nobel Prize winners, and cultural icons whose names are etched into history. But on this particular afternoon, as the motorcade carrying the Los Angeles Dodgers rolled through the iron gates of 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, something entirely different was in the air. Something that no protocol officer had prepared for. Something that no speechwriter had anticipated. Something that would, within hours, bring the most powerful building in the world to a complete and unexpected standstill. At the center of it all stood one man. Shohei Ohtani. The Dodgers' visit to the White House was a scheduled celebration, a formal recognition of their World Series championship, the kind of ceremonial tradition that has existed in American baseball for decades. The team arrived in matching suits, polished and composed, ready for handshakes, photographs, and carefully rehearsed smiles in front of the cameras. Protocol staff had mapped out every minute of the event. The president's schedule was tight. The ceremony would last exactly 45 minutes. Everyone had their assigned positions. Everything was under control. Or so they believed. From the moment the Dodgers stepped off the bus, the atmosphere shifted. White House staff members, veterans who had guided NFL champions, NBA dynasties, and Olympic delegations through these same hallways, found themselves doing something they almost never do on duty. They stopped. They stared. Not at the whole team. Not at the coaches or the ownership group. Their eyes locked onto one figure moving quietly through the corridor, his large frame somehow carrying itself with a softness that seemed almost impossible for someone of his physical stature. Shohei Ohtani walked with his head slightly bowed, his expression calm, his eyes taking in the surroundings with a quiet reverence that felt deeply genuine. One senior protocol officer, a woman who had served through 3 administrations, later told colleagues something she had never said about any visiting athlete before. She said she noticed him the moment he entered the East Wing. Not because of his size. Not because of his fame. But because of the way he looked at everything, like he understood exactly where he was standing and felt the weight of it. The first extraordinary moment came before the official ceremony even began. As the team was being guided through the Roosevelt Room for a pre-event briefing, one of the younger White House housekeeping staff members, a woman in her late 50s who had worked in the building for over 20 years, accidentally dropped a tray of water glasses near the entrance. The sound shattered the formal silence of the corridor. Several players flinched. A few turned briefly and looked away. Staff members rushed forward with apologies and towels. But Ohtani was already moving. Before any of the official staff could react, he stepped forward calmly, crouched down, and began picking up the broken pieces himself. Not with the performative gesture of someone aware of cameras. Not with the theatrical kindness of a celebrity building a public image. He did it quietly, efficiently, with the natural instinct of someone who had simply been raised to believe that this was the right thing to do. The housekeeper looked up from the floor, her face flushed with embarrassment, and found herself face to face with the most famous baseball player on the planet. She tried to speak. She couldn't. Ohtani gave a small, respectful bow and said something softly through his interpreter. The words were simple. He said he was sorry for the noise startling everyone, and asked if she was okay. The corridor fell completely silent. A young White House aide standing nearby gripped the arm of a colleague beside him and whispered, "What on earth is going on?" Word spread through the building the way it only can in a place where information moves at the speed of whispered urgency. Within minutes, staff members who had no official reason to be anywhere near the East Wing began finding excuses to pass through the corridor. Veteran Secret Service agents who had protected presidents for decades found themselves craning their necks. Administrative assistants left their desks. Senior policy advisors who hadn't watched a baseball game in years suddenly remembered they had urgent business near the Roosevelt Room. One by one, quietly, almost involuntarily, the staff of the White House began to gather. They weren't gathering to see a celebrity. They weren't gathering for an autograph or a photograph. They were gathering because something was happening that none of them could quite explain or resist. Something in Ohtani's presence, the combination of his extraordinary physical greatness and his profound, almost disarming humility, was pulling people toward him the way a still, deep lake pulls those who stand at its edge. A senior communications director who had worked in the building for 11 years later described it to a reporter in simple terms. She said she had seen every kind of famous person walk through those halls. Politicians, athletes, actors, world leaders. But she had never seen anyone make the staff feel seen the way Ohtani did. Without even trying. Without a single calculated move. Just by being exactly who he was. The ceremony itself proceeded as planned. The president offered remarks. The Dodgers were recognized. Photographs were taken on the South Lawn with the kind of careful, ceremonial precision that the White House does better than anyone in the world. But it was what happened after the official program ended that no one will forget. As the team began moving toward the exit for departure, one of the kitchen staff, a young man, barely 23, who had emigrated from Central America 5 years earlier and had worked at the White House for just 8 months, stepped forward hesitantly from the edge of the corridor. He was holding something small in his hands. A baseball. Old, worn, with the stitching slightly frayed on one side. He had clearly carried it with him from home that morning, perhaps telling himself he would never have the courage to approach. He stood there frozen, his hands trembling slightly, his eyes fixed on the floor. Ohtani's interpreter noticed first. He leaned close to Ohtani and said something quietly. Ohtani turned, saw the young man, and without hesitation, walked directly toward him. Not with the rushed, distracted energy of a star managing an endless line of admirers. Slowly. Deliberately. With his full attention. He stopped in front of the young man and waited. The young man looked up, startled, overwhelmed. He extended the baseball with both hands, the way one presents something precious, something that carries meaning far beyond its physical form. In Japanese culture, this gesture carries deep significance. In many Asian traditions, offering something with both hands is a sign of genuine respect and sincerity. It is not a casual act. It says, "I give you this with everything I have." Ohtani received the ball with both hands. The young man's breath caught in his throat. Ohtani held the ball for a moment, looked at it carefully, then looked back at the young man with an expression that contained no performance, no celebrity distance, no manufactured warmth. He spoke through his interpreter. He asked the young man his name. He asked where he was from. He asked how long he had worked at the White House. For 3 full minutes, in the middle of the corridor of the most powerful building in the world, Shohei Ohtani gave his complete and undivided attention to a young kitchen worker whose name no one in that building had ever asked before. When Ohtani finally signed the baseball and returned it with both hands, the same respectful gesture the young man had offered, something happened in that corridor that protocol officers had no category for and no training to manage. People cried. Not dramatically. Not loudly. But standing against the walls of that hallway, career government employees, Secret Service agents, senior staff members who had seen things in those halls that would fill books, several of them quietly wiped their eyes and said nothing. The images and video clips reached social media within the hour. A staffer's phone, a security camera angle shared by someone with access, a brief clip caught by a journalist's camera at the edge of the frame. Within 3 hours, the footage of Ohtani receiving the baseball with both hands had been viewed more than 40 million times across platforms. Within 6 hours, it was the top trending topic in the United States, Japan, South Korea, the Dominican Republic, and 17 other countries. The reactions came in waves. Former players, coaches, and baseball executives shared the clip with single-word captions. Legends. Class. Real. Cultural commentators wrote long threads about the Japanese concept of omotenashi, a philosophy of wholehearted hospitality and selfless consideration for others that runs so deeply through Japanese culture it becomes invisible to those who carry it, like water to a fish. Sports media networks cleared their afternoon programming. Former MLB commissioners appeared on emergency panel discussions. Psychologists and cultural anthropologists were called in to explain what millions of viewers had already felt in their bones the moment they watched the clip. One former World Series champion, appearing on a live broadcast, sat quietly for a moment after watching the footage on air. Then he looked into the camera and said what everyone was already thinking. He said he had played 20 years in professional baseball, shared locker rooms with some of the greatest players who ever lived, and he had never once seen someone that famous make another human being feel that important. Not once. Back at the White House, as the Dodgers motorcade prepared to depart, the young kitchen worker stood alone in the corridor holding his baseball with both hands pressed against his chest. Around him, the building slowly returned to its rhythms. Phones rang. Doors opened and closed. The machinery of government resumed its endless motion. But the young man stood still. A senior protocol officer, the same woman who had noticed Ohtani the moment he entered the East Wing, walked past him and stopped. She looked at the baseball in his hands, then at his face, and asked him quietly if he was all right. He looked up at her. His eyes were still wet. He nodded slowly and said yes. Then he said something that she would repeat to colleagues for months afterward, something that became the quiet, unscripted summary of everything that had happened that afternoon in the halls of the most powerful building in the world. He said, he used both hands. 4 words. In the professional world of MLB, where power is measured in exit velocity and contracts and World Series rings, Shohei Ohtani had walked into the White House and reminded everyone inside it, from the most senior official to the youngest staff member, of something that statistics cannot measure and money cannot buy. That true greatness bows. That real strength is gentle. And that the most powerful thing a person can do, in any room, in any country, in any language, is make another human being feel that they matter. The motorcade pulled away from the iron gates as the afternoon light fell across the south lawn. Inside the building, the corridor was quiet again. But something had changed. And everyone who had been there knew it.